Mansoor. Good morning, this is Zakaria Mansoor. We are doing another grade 10 lesson. We're coming to you live from South Africa. We're doing life sciences, skeletal system. Of course, it's the continuation from the previous lesson. A quick reminder of what we're doing again. We're doing the skeletal system. We started last week. And we midway. So we did like the cranium, we did the thoracic cavity, the bones around there, and we talked a little bit about the previous work, which was the exoskeleton as well. So we're going to hit the ground running, and we're going to talk about structures in nature. So if you look at structures in nature, we have a lot of different animals and insects that have similar features to humans. So if you look at this insect over here, of course, it could be related to humans in structure here. And if you look at it, it has a shape of what we saw last week. When we looked at the skeletal system, we saw that there were bones, and there were specific bones that looked like this. So if you want to take a few seconds and just look at it. So we're looking at the outline structure of the butterfly. So yes, it's the shape of the pelvis. Now structurally, it's integral for the support of our bones, and it's solidified. So it's very strong. One of the strongest bones in our body, and you find that when people get old, you don't want to slip and fall because of it. So if you look at the structure of this butterfly, it looks almost exactly like the pelvis that we have in our skeletal system. And if you look at other birds, they also have a similar wing pattern as well. If you open the bird flat out, like even the chicken that you eat at home. So when you cut it open flat, it has a similar shape. Of course, we have it in nature as well, and if you look at in nature, we have it on leaves and on different types of wood. I'm going to outline this. Once I've outlined it, we'll go to the next page. There we go. Okay, so the pelvis is the biggest bone in the body, and this is what I was showing you here. If you look at it, it's so similar to the butterfly that we saw previously. I've known of people that have had injuries with their pelvis, and of course they fall on their hips and it has a crack here, and once that's done, then it's over. You find that they start limping, and you probably need to like put like titanium wells in there and have a good operation if you are going to mend it. But I think a lot of people that are old and that do have injuries like this, they probably just leave it because I'm not sure why, old people are like that. Some of them don't want to seek assistance in hospital. It probably gives them, puts the pressure up, and the more they question the injuries, the more sick they become. From the psychological point of view, of course. Okay, so this is the structure of the pelvis, and we knew from last week it's important to label your diagrams correctly. We practiced it as well. There was some homework that was given. So let's look at some of the parts here. We have the iliac crest here, the acetabulum, the ischium, and the pubis. They're very similar to names that we see on flowers and trees. You find that a lot of the doctors that are botanists sometimes are physicians as well. So you find the names, the Latin names, very similar to the ones that we have in plants as well. So skeletal framework of a pelvic girdle. You notice that, of course, it's not one bone like the one that you see here. This is, of course, just a 3D diagram. But as you go more in depth, you'll find that it consists of many more like smaller bones that are put together. Because of course, when you're a baby, you, you grow, of course. And we talked about the important food that you eat, especially for calcium enrichment in your bones. We know that the more calcium you have, the stronger your bones will be. And of course, then you have the deficiencies, of course, and we'll talk about that in the end of the lesson. But when you are young, especially as a baby, it's important to consume as much calcium as you can, but not in an excessive way because when you talk to physicians and dietitians, they will tell you that your body only uses the amount that it requires. So I'm sure some of you have like babies in the family, and you should know that it's vital for them to get all the nutrients, especially if it's fresh breast milk. I won't say fresh, but it's so funny. But of course, with the mundane and the busy lifestyle that women have, they work and sometimes they're independent, so they're breadwinners, so they cannot breastfeed. So people use artificial milk. Of course, the natural one, as we know from studies, organic is always better. So you should have a good amount of calcium in your bones, in your diet. And if you can't get it from milk, you can get it from vegetables as well. But of course, the main source of protein is like meat. Okay, let's look at some of the functions. Um, it forms a strong support structure for the attachment of the arms, provides large area of bone for the attachment of muscles, as you see here. So the bones like fit in. If you notice the skeletal system from last week, it's almost like a puzzle. So if you got like Legos, our skeletal system, you could say, is like Legos. And if you've played with Legos, or even if you look at your keyboard, or it's like a girdle where you put like um, the Lego small pieces or blocks to make a house or to make a man. So our skeletal system is so similar to that. And of course, a lot of you play games, online games, so you should know how to attach certain um, devices or skin on your system. And if you look at if you do programming at school, then you probably learned Scratch and how to do different layers. So our body is just like that, very similar. The concept of it provides large area of bone for the attachment of muscles, forms ball and socket joints with the arms, which allows the arms to move freely. Okay, so we've seen that. Um, and of course, we discussed this on the previous one where we saw the diagram of the pelvis. And then here we talk about forms, ball, and socket joints. So if you do technology as well, if you've made a robot, you notice, I don't know if you know what a ball and joint is, I'm sure you've done it. Um, so if you look at, let's say, a robot man, okay. So if you have a robot man here, put a head on for him, give him a smiley face. So if you look at the sockets here, and then you look at another arm that we can attach to the robot. So this arm, of course, will go in here. So this is what they refer to by ball and socket joints. Okay, so you can see from the ball and socket joints how you attach a robot together. Um, and the human body is similar to that. But of course, we don't add the attachments. What we do is just like Legos. Here, we don't add the attachments. Our body grows internally, externally as well, exoskeleton. And of course, that's the skin and your hair as well. Okay, so fact points important here. We always have these notes on the corner. The female pelvic girdle is wider and lighter than the male. Now this is very important, extremely important for us to determine the sex or gender from a male to a female. And of course, we have some anomalies, but we're not going to talk about that. Those are for PhD holders. So basically, the first question I would ask you is why do you think the female pelvic girdle is wider? Can we give you a few seconds to think about it? I'm just going to continue my drawing here. So again, the question is, why do you think the female pelvic girdle is wider and lighter than the male? So you have maybe a positive here already, and this one. So of course we discussed positive and negatives. I did give you homework last week. Um, so when we look back here, so I'm gonna just label this as the female one, and then inside here I'm gonna, let's say, draw another one that will represent the male pelvic bone. So let's put this one as F. M. Okay, so of course, first reason would be is that a woman, woman, yeah, got some legs, some hands, and of course, maybe her small stomach here. So we know that females, of course, can be pregnant only, and if you look at the female here, you notice that during pregnancy, and um, I'm not going to say that all women are fatter or plumpier than men. Could be, but females are probably saying no way. But because of this pregnancy, you would have the pelvic bone being wider and lighter as well. Lighter could be a disadvantage to a female, but this is it. And of course, the male one, if you look at this here, the female one, it should be wider because when a woman gives birth as well, the baby comes out here. Um, so of course, uh, for reproductive reasons as well, she would need to have a wider bone. But basically, the baby comes out there, so that could be one reason. The male one, of course, will be the opposite. He doesn't need a belly here for pregnancy. And then we come to the advantages of and disadvantages of this one here. Um, lighter. So if you look at it, a woman carries the baby during pregnancy. So if you look at it, a baby is like almost a parasite. In fact, it is like a parasite in the mother's womb or in the mother's stomach, and it absorbs all the nutrients from the mother. And that being said, it could be absorbing the calcium from the food and leaves the mother with a deficiency there. Uh, so therefore, when you look at like women, especially when they fall, their bones are weaker and brittle. So of course we have gender-based violence, so it's inappropriate or it's not normal to hit a woman and break a bone, you know. Um, so of course it's very important if women are pregnant to supplement themselves with tablets if they cannot have the proper nutrients or organic nutrients. This is an adaptation to allow for pregnancy and childbirth. So that is the difference. Um, you find that sometimes the body would adapt, but once you hit the mark of 18, then your body doesn't really, your bones don't really grow. You could increase your muscle size, and of course, when you're fat, then you just increase all your, you just get, what do I say, you turn into a balloon, but it's important to metabolize that fat if you do have, especially if you're a female because your bones are lighter. Okay, so these are the basic bones we have here below the pelvic bone. So we have the femur here. As you can see, it's very solid because it holds a lot of, or majority of the mass below the pelvic bone. The patella is here, like your kneecap, just so where your kneecap is here, there's another, that ball is called the patella, and then you have the tibia and the fibula. If you look at these bones here, they are very high in density compared to the other bones, which are much thinner. Um, if you look at your rib cage as well, you notice in a side view, they're very thin compared to the femur bones. We have another view of it as well. Okay, so the femur is the largest and strongest bone in the body. The upper end forms a ball and socket joint with the hip bone, while the lower end articulates with the tibia to form the hinge joint of the knee. The patella or kneecap is a flat triangular bone which is embedded in the tendon of the thigh muscle and attached by a ligament to the tibia. So as you can see, we talked about Legos. And you can see the attachment there, almost like a robot. What would it makes sense, like to have people that do aesthetic, prosthetic arms. So when people go over mines, um, when the legs and stuff get blown off, very common in like South Asia, even in Burundi and in Africa in some places. But basically, if you know what a mine is, I'm sure you've seen movies. Um, so they put a explosive there, and they have grass here, and there's flowers here, so you can't really see the mine. And when children or men step on it, their leg gets blown off. You see it in movies, I think there's a movie called Hotel Burundi. I can't remember the name, but so you find children stepping on them, and their whole leg gets blown off. So it would be nice to use technology to kind of have like prosthetic arms in a lot of these countries, because you find that now that their leg has been blown off, they have to walk with these crutches, you know. So as we talked about jobs last week or in the first week, you could specialize in something like that, where you could provide help back to society. You know, it's always good to give something back to society. So there are two bones in the lower leg, the tibia, the shin bone. This is the shin bone here. You find that like people, when you go to doctors and physios, they'll tell you that bones are very important, and when you have fractures, you go to them and you're like, please doctor, like my joints are paining, and they tell you that it's very important when you're playing contact sports that you don't bump into people. And you find that if you play football, you find that like number fours and defenders, they always getting the whiplash end of the stick. So very important that you do not get fractures when you are young. Very important to protect yourself. And of course, in soccer, you have something called the shin guard. So let me just color this in when you're playing football. I'm sure even when you're playing rugby, probably. Um, so yeah, that's a shin guard. And when it's very hard, you find that these defenders always having issues. And when you go to the physiologist, they're like, hey, when you're playing contact sports, make sure that you gear yourself correctly. So you find in America, they have the NFL. And I'm sure you've seen like people that play NFL, they really kitted up. They have like even more than rugby players, like 10 times the amount that rugby players wear. And they have like a helmet, they have like shin guards, butt guards, chest guards, and they have like metal in them. So I wonder why it isn't a good idea for them to actually introduce that in rugby. So anyway, people get blown up. We talked about it. Jobs, very good job to have is I can't remember the name, but it has to do with a lot of technology and of course physiology. So you probably it's related to maybe sports science, prosthetic sports science maybe. So very important. The physiologist said, um, he said, why don't you not play any sports? And I'm like, dude, you have to play some sports, or it'll make you just dull, you know. You find that a lot of, there was a study done by a Nigerian doctor, and he talked about the injuries that are prone to NFL players from them smashing heads. So you know when you have like a scrum in rugby and you smash your head onto the opponent's head. So he did a study on that, and it helped a lot of players that had injuries like this before, because it's like almost boxes, or you know, like the Alis and the big guys, that the Lennoxes, and when they punch, they hit the head also and hit the cranium. And if you look at like boxers like Nasir and stuff, um, when they have like injuries that, like even Velasquez and stuff, they have brain injuries that they have to suffer with. So it's important when you play a sport to wear the proper armor or the proper attire that will be befitting to protect yourself. Okay, so we have the shin bone there, the larger of the two. You saw the two bones there next to each other. The fibula is thinner than the tibia. that serves mainly for the attachment of muscles. So next week we will start with the attachment of muscles. As you've noticed from the beginning, we started with the skeleton and now we're continuing. So probably next week we're going to deal more with attaching of the muscles to the bone. And of course, if you picture you eating KFC or some kind of chicken and you bite on it, you notice that of course you can get the chicken meat out and you just left with the bone. Some people eat the bones because it has some calcium in it or iron. The structure of the foot is similar to that of the hand. If you look at it here, very similar. If you look at these toes here, the bones, but then we notice that people in, let's say, Southeast of Asia, um, Southeast of Asia, they have like very long, like toes, like taller, like not taller, but longer than female toes. So if you look at like female toes, like generally they, like if you look at Southeast Asian toes like Cambodia, Vietnam, their toes are like really long and they almost look like fingers. So if you're looking down at them, what's strange about them is that uh, they look like fingers of, like my hands, my fingers are short, but they almost look like them. Um, Not short and stubby, very long. So anyway, it looks like if you look at it, it's of course Homo sapien, and the skeletal structure here, of course, in humans we have the same with some of the Homo sapiens have four. With humans we have five on the top and five at the bottom. And in animals it varies. And like we talked about in the first lesson when I gave you the question about the platypus and another animal like the beaver. Even in animals like these, one has webbed feet, one has normal feet. Okay, so let's look at this here. There are 7 tarsals, and then if you look at it, so, or ankle bones. So here we have it here. Only one of which, the talus, articulates with the tibia. So this is the tibia that goes up to the top here. So you see that the talus articulates with the tibia only, and then this is the extension here where you have your toes. And in other languages, we like in the Anglo-Saxons we would say fingers, or if this was the head here. Um, so some other cultures or languages, they call these, they call all of them fingers. So you have like 20 fingers, but in English, we would call, or in Latin, we would call these fingers, and these we would call toes. Of course, when you are studying medicine, you would study uh, these terms in Latin, so you won't have a confusion in that. The heel bone is the largest of the tarsal bones and is the bone to which the calf muscle is attached. Calf muscles, of course, are very important to exercise, especially your calves. And you notice that people that cycle, they have huge calf muscles because you're always exercising them, and they're very well defined as well. The heel bone presses firmly on the ground when one stands, walks, or runs. So this is the heel bone here at the bottom. Um, Very important that you use the correct footwear. Footwear is very important. So if this was your toes, And if you have a shoe, it's very important that you get the correct arch support for your shoe or your ankle support here. In this case, um, your heel bone. You have your heel bone here and your arch on the inside. Um, Very important when you're young to use the correct kind of footwear. And even if you don't, you could just wear like your slip slop. So if you have like a normal slip slop and you don't have like a proper tacky, um, then it's flat here at the bottom, which is great because I mean it is balanced and it's like almost silicone. And if you look at like attire that they used to wear, like footwear, if you look at this is just rubber. And if you look at like in China and even in Holland, they had like wooden shoes. Some of them wore wooden shoes, and um, aesthetically, they use it for some horrible reason. Like sometimes they use it for like women in China for their foot to be small, like they have like some kind of fetish there. But anyway, in general, like the Dutch shoes, they're nice and flat, so you could wear them. It could have good support for your feet as well. Okay, so we look at other bones here, phalanges. You see them all here, 14 of them. And then of course your big toe is here, your small pinky toe there. Together these structures consist of the bones that form the lower limb. Okay, functions of the skeleton. This is the most important part of the skeletal structure. The human skeleton is living and performs many functions in the body. Some important functions are summarized below. So we have number one, which is movement. Muscles attached to the bones of the skeleton enabling movement. So this is like number one. Protection. So this is if you, so movement of course to move, and of course when you are a baby, you're busy crawling from one stage of evolution. So you start from here, come out, and then you start like uh, holding. So this is like a 1-year-old baby, and then you get to 2-year-old babies that start holding onto stuff. Like if this was a table or something, they start holding onto it. And then of course, as they hit maybe two, as they hit like 1.5 or maybe one. So I'm gonna put one there. I'm gonna put like 1 to 12 months. 1 to 12 months, 1 year to 2 years, and then they start running, of course. And then as you get older, once you hit like 70, then you start going the other way. And not everyone. So if you gym, if you play sports, you wouldn't have that issue. And of course, when you hit like 120, then you right. Okay, so the second one we have is protection. So talked about that movement. The skull protects the brain, and we talked about it last week that uh, it's very solidified the brain, the cranium. Uh, of course, to protect us from head injuries. Uh, Once you get conked on your head, you could have brain injury. So therefore, some people have like a thick skull. So I'm sure you've heard of the term like, "Hey, you thick." So they're referring to people's skulls. Sometimes you conk people, it doesn't crack. Sometimes you do, and it does crack. So, anyways, skull protects the brain. Important. We talked about this, not like the rib cage. Remember the rib cage? It moves because of respiration. So when you exhale and inhale, that moves. So you might think that it's solid, but if someone pierces you with a metal or sharp object, it will go right through. The rib cage protects the heart and lungs. The pelvic bones protect the digestive tract and reproductive organs. Okay, so of course we have support, very important, storage of minerals such as calcium and phosphate and iron. We know that it makes a woman weaker, so it's important that she uses the correct kind of supplement in order to get that back, or just eating naturally, just to, or just having a cup of tea, you know. Sometimes a woman might be pregnant and have the baby. She's kind of has a deficit now in her body, so very important for her just to metabolize herself by having fluids, you know, natural stuff. And then we have hearing. We saw the bones for the outer ear, the cochlea at the beginning, and then red blood cell production. So we know that the bone marrow is important for production of red blood cells. Here we looked at the long bone. Okay, so basically this is telling you about the different types of labeling that you have for your long bone. If you look at it here in your books, you'll find that this is it, and these are the definitions for them. So if you look at spongy bone found in the epiphysis of long bone and contains red marrow. As you can see here, we talked about the ball and joints, and then you have the cartilage that's there on the top of it, almost like a car when you have the side a part that is attached to the tire. I think it's called the thyroid end. Um, then you have the labeling of it. The marrow cavity um, stores the calcium, and then if you look at the endosteum, we talked about that in the tapeworm. Okay, so here the marrow cavity, this is filled with yellow marrow, which consists largely of fat. You find all of these ones here. Like if you look at the red bone marrow found in spaces between the trabecular and spongy bone, this is where the red blood cells are made. And if you look at the amount of red blood cells that are made per second, it's like 2 to 3 million per second, which is probably every time that our heart beats. As you've seen this diagram here, you should try and practice it. Remember, you should try and practice all the diagrams that is in our syllabus and that is in our books. So make sure that you follow all the guidelines for biological drawings. We talked about it. Try to draw the diagram correctly because you will see something like this in the exam. You will see a diagram like this possibly, and you will be asked to label it. So you should practice it. Give your diagram a caption or heading. Your diagram must take up at least half a page. You should draw in pencil. It doesn't have to be 100% correct like the ones that you see on the picture or in your book, but close as possible so that you can differentiate between one bone compared to the other bone. Very important, labels should not cross. We should draw with a ruler. As you can see, these labels do not cross. Very important question: which deficiency disease can have similar effects on bones in children? If you look at this disease, rickets, you find this happening here. So lack of efficiency, lack of calcium, and also genetics as well. So it could be calcium and genetics as well. So as you can see, it's very awkward to have these kind of deficiencies. And we hope that we don't. Symptoms of calcium deficiency, um, as you can see, tiredness, aches, tooth decay. So very important that you get the correct vitamins and minerals. These are some of the deficiencies that people have in their bones. They look at normal bone and osteoporosis. Lots of huge gaps and less calcium. And of course, when you fall, especially as a woman, easier to break your bones. And this is calcium deficiency, but this is more when you get older as well. Look at your spinal column here as well. And if you are fat, of course, or obese, then it would, of course, as gravity, pull your weight down. Diseases like Pagé's disease of bone, if you look at it compared to this one here, it's different. Um, so you could see that it looks calcified. Uh, Very calcified, and you find these in like Neanderthals. So if you look at people that stayed in the mountains, or Bigfoots as you call them, and if you look at like if you Google Andre the Giant, you find that these, of course, this might not be a real structure. Of course, this is probably stone or probably wood, but it's just giving you an example of some of the people that do exist, and some of them are like 2-3 meters tall. So of course not a real one, but if you Google Andre the Giant, you'll find that that's the bone structure that we probably looking at. Homework: do you know of anyone with any bone disorders? Um, so you have some of them like cancerous ones. What medication do they take? And what benefit is the medication to the patient? If you have any questions, please email them to Tabi. So thank you so much. Hope you guys have a great one.